Hello, how are you? Today I'm going to tell you about 3 foods that you shouldn't consume together with coffee in your daily routine. These are foods that many people actually combine with coffee, but they can hinder nutrient absorption and even harm your health. I'll also tell you about another thing you shouldn't consume with coffee. You're going to love this video, so stay until the end. You won't want to miss it. Before we start, I want to ask you, how many cups of coffee do you drink per day? Write it for me here in the comments. I would love to see your comment. Go ahead and leave your like on the video. It's super important to me. And if you know someone who drinks a lot of coffee throughout the day and needs this tip, share this video. Let's expand our chain of kindness. When we think of coffee, we definitely think of a drink, a beverage, that's going to give us a boost, wake us up. But coffee doesn't just have this beneficial effect of increasing energy and focus. It also contains polyphenols, tannins, caffeine itself, and natural antioxidants like chlorogenic acid. In other words, it has many positive effects on our body, but these compounds in coffee can also bind to certain minerals in our intestines, forming some compounds that the body has more difficulty absorbing. This doesn't mean that coffee will destroy vitamins or minerals, nothing like that. But it can reduce the absorption of these vitamins, minerals, and nutrients depending on when it is consumed. So I'm going to tell you about 3 things you should avoid consuming together with coffee so you can get more benefits from them. The first food on our list, in fact, the first nutrient, is foods rich in iron. There is a difference between 2 types of iron that I'll explain further, but we already know that iron is very important for our body in a broad sense, right? It is very necessary for the formation of hemoglobin, which is that protein present in red blood cells that helps transport oxygen throughout the body and so on. So when iron levels get lower, anemia can develop, which may cause symptoms like tiredness, weakness, loss of concentration, paleness, and also a drop in energy. As I mentioned, there are 2 types of iron that we consume daily, and one of them is more affected by coffee consumption. When we think about heme iron, it's connected to hemoglobin, it's linked to animal protein. And this animal protein is connected to the iron there, so it has a more privileged, more preferential absorption site. So, foods rich in iron that come from animal sources, like meat and eggs, are also affected. They can have their absorption reduced a bit, but not as significantly as other sources. The real problem is with the iron found in plant-based foods, that is, non-heme iron, from beans, lentils, vegetables. They are more sensitive to interference because the tannins and polyphenols in coffee can bind to this iron and reduce the amount that the body is actually able to absorb. So, studies show that having coffee after meals can significantly reduce iron absorption, especially when the meal relies more on plant-based iron, right? If you are a vegetarian, or if in that meal you ate a lot of plant-based foods trying to get more iron, and you have coffee after that meal, it can compete with absorption and can, in fact, decrease iron absorption. So, ideally, you should wait 45 to 60 minutes after the meal before having your coffee to be safe. The second food group is foods rich in calcium, and the logic here is very similar as well, because calcium is essential for the health of bones and teeth, and it plays a role in muscle contraction and the functioning of the nervous system. And caffeine can slightly increase the elimination of calcium through urine. This is a very interesting point. And it can also decrease the intestinal absorption of this nutrient that is so important for us. That's why coffee, when consumed in large quantities together with calcium or calcium-rich foods, can compete with absorption. Patricia, does that mean I can't have coffee with milk anymore? No. It means that it depends on how much coffee you drink together with foods rich in milk, or rather, in calcium. So let's suppose you have a big mug, about a cup of milk in the morning, and you add a little coffee. Okay, that's not a problem. Now, if you're the kind of person who drinks coffee throughout the entire day, whatever you eat, you're always having coffee, and you don't consume many sources of calcium at other times, then you could actually have a decrease in calcium absorption, and you might end up with lower calcium levels in your body. So, ideally, you should try to be careful, especially if you're at risk regarding your bone mass. If you have osteoporosis or osteopenia, you need to be extra mindful of the timing when consuming both calcium and coffee. Once again, the ideal is that you try not to consume them in the same meal. Leave coffee consumption for about 40 to 60 minutes after having sources of calcium to prevent issues and to ensure that you will be able to absorb this nutrient well. Another common mistake is consuming coffee with large amounts of sugar. In this case, we know that people who add a lot of sugar, who use condensed milk, syrups, or drink gourmet coffees, can experience a spike in glucose and, consequently, a spike in insulin, which can lead to hunger throughout the day, difficulty with metabolic control, possible weight gain, and even an increased risk of type 2 diabetes. I mention this because there are people who drink coffee all day long. That's really not something you should do. Coffee should never replace water, but we know that this happens. People who are very tired, who stayed up all night working, who need more energy, There are people who make a whole pot of coffee and drink a thermos or two a day, loaded with sugar too. So this is a problem. Also be careful if you use sweeteners because of the large amount of sweetener you might be consuming along with the coffee. And especially depending on the type, it can cause diarrhea, abdominal bloating, gas, cramps. So be careful. I have a guide to sweeteners here that explains which ones are best and so on. I'll leave it down below in the description for you. Another important point to mention is that coffee can interfere with the absorption of medications and dietary supplements, especially medications like thyroid hormone, levothyroxine, if you have hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Ideally, you should wait 60 minutes before having coffee to prevent this problem, or even medications to control blood pressure or medications for anxiety. Ideally, you shouldn't consume them together because coffee can really stimulate the body and can even interfere with absorption. It can increase heart rate, it can raise blood pressure, so it can slightly alter the way these medications work in the body. Once again, if you can wait 60 minutes, that's a good option. And if you suffer from anxiety or high blood pressure, controlling the amount of coffee you drink per day can be beneficial, or even opting for a decaffeinated coffee. When we think about supplements, we know that iron and calcium, as I mentioned before, can have their absorption hindered by coffee, but so can zinc and magnesium. So, ideally, you shouldn't take your multivitamin at breakfast along with a big mug of coffee. Save it to take around lunch or dinner, during a meal when you'll have good absorption of these nutrients, but without caffeine interfering. In fact, there's a video here on the channel talking about the main mistakes when taking supplements. I'll leave it down below in the description for you. Tell me down below if you've made any of these mistakes and which one you're going to change. I'd love to see your comment. Remember to like the video, that really helps me out, and share it with anyone who would enjoy it or needs it. Let's work together to expand this chain of kindness. That's what I want here with the channel. See you next time. Bye.